So taking reflective practice forward, there are many models of reflective practice that we can use to guide the process of reflection and help us develop as professionals. And what we need to do in order to take reflective practice forward is to consider all the models and understand, compare and contrast the models and how we may use models productively in terms of application. And there is one simple strategy called the Disney strategy of reflective practice, which we can add at this point. And what this particular model does for the practitioner is place the teacher in particular roles in terms of their thinking, in terms of their reflection. They take on a role of a dreamer, how they would like things to be. They take on the role of a realist, how things are. And they also take on the role of the critic, or in other words, how things should be, ought to be. And with all models of reflection and reflective practice, there are points of comparison as well as points of contrast. And so we can look at some of these and understand that although there are different models, they all provide the same process, the same foundation that we engage with as reflective practitioners. And what we see here in terms of a comparison is that we can look at the Lawley and Tompkins model in comparison to the Kolb's learning cycle. And where we have in the Lawley and Tompkins model a reflection on what happened, or the internal reflection of the experience, this is equivalent to Kolb's learning cycle in terms of active experimentation and the concrete experience that we have from that experimentation in the classroom. We can also see in the Lawley and Tompkins model what meaning the individual may give to what happened, both from the external as well as the internal perspective, and how they're thinking about that particular experience. And in terms of Kolb's learning cycle, this compares with the stage of reflective observation, where the individual is sitting down and thinking through the experience and trying to give meaning to it. And with the Lawley and Tompkins model, we can also think about the aspect of learning and the conclusion point of the process of reflection, and how we're evaluating the experience and evaluating our response to the experience, those external and internal components. And these correspond with Kolb's learning cycle in terms of the abstract conceptualization aspect of the cycle. And we can also compare the Lawley and Tompkins model with the Disney strategy of reflection. And stage 2 of the Lawley and Tompkins model, we're looking at the outcomes that we wish to achieve and what evidence we're using in order to consider improvements and monitor improvements. In other words, what feedback we have. And this compares with the dreamer role that the reflective practitioner takes on in terms of the Disney strategy. With the Lawley and Tompkins model, we can also consider the aspect of planning and how and when we will put into action that plan. And this compares with the role of the realist that the individual practitioner can take on in the classroom. And in terms of the Lawley and Tompkins model, we can look at what might get in the way, what barriers might affect our planning, and what can we do in order to overcome those barriers. And the role that the reflective practitioner takes on here is of a critic of their practice, considering how they can do things in different ways and being critical in terms of what they're doing. So we see that All these different models are not necessarily isolated separate models. They are just processes that we can use, and there are similarities and differences with all these models. They do compare with one another, and they are simply mechanisms that we use as reflective practitioners. And in terms of taking reflective practice forward, what we need to do is find the model that works for us, the one that we're most comfortable with, and use that model productively as reflective practitioners.